What if I told you that the International Space Station, a structure that took 13 years to build, required over 40 rocket launches, and cost more than $150 billion, might already be a relic of the past? Not because it failed. It didn't. The ISS is one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. But because right now, sitting on a launch pad in South Texas, there is a single rocket that could replace it in one launch. No assembly, no decades of construction, no army of spacewalking astronauts connecting modules piece by piece in the freezing vacuum of space. One rocket, one launch, one complete space station. This is the story of what happens when the most ambitious spacecraft ever built stops being just a rocket and becomes a home. To understand why this idea is so powerful, you first need to understand the problem it solves. The International Space Station is extraordinary, but it's also cramped in ways that are genuinely difficult to appreciate from Earth. Its total pressurized volume is about 916 cubic meters, roughly equivalent to a large 6-bedroom house. That space is shared between 6 astronauts, and it is packed, densely, unavoidably packed. Cables run along every surface. Equipment floats tethered to walls. Experiments occupy every available corner. There is almost no empty space, because empty space was a luxury no one could afford when every cubic meter had to be launched from Earth at tremendous cost and assembled in orbit by human hands in spacesuits. And the assembly process itself was an almost unimaginable undertaking. More than 40 flights, hundreds of spacewalks, module after module, carefully sized to fit inside rocket fairings, launched separately, maneuvered into position, and bolted together over the course of 13 years. It was a triumph of international cooperation and human ingenuity, but it was also the only way we knew how to do it at the time. The fundamental constraint was always the rocket. Whatever you wanted to put in space had to fit inside the fairing, the protective nose cone of whatever rocket you were launching. That meant everything had to be small. Small modules, connected by small tunnels, stacked and assembled into something larger over time. The station grew the only way it could, incrementally, expensively, slowly. What changes everything is when the rocket itself is no longer the limiting factor. What changes everything is Starship. Starship is the largest rocket ever built, standing 122 meters tall. When stacked with its super heavy booster, it dwarfs every launch vehicle that came before it. But raw size isn't the point. The point is what that size means for what you can put in space. The Starship upper stage alone, the spacecraft portion that actually reaches orbit, has an interior volume of roughly 1,000 cubic meters. Let that sink in for a moment. That's already larger than the entire pressurized volume of the International Space Station, which took 13 years and $150 billion to assemble. And it arrives in orbit complete, in a single vehicle, on a single launch. This is where an idea that's been circulating quietly in aerospace circles starts to look less like speculation and more like an obvious next step. What if, instead of using Starship purely as a cargo carrier or a crew transport, you use Starship itself as the space station? The concept isn't entirely without historical precedent. Back in 1973, NASA did something remarkably similar with Skylab, America's first space station, which was built from a converted Saturn V rocket stage. The same vehicle that had launched astronauts to the moon was repurposed, its empty propellant tank transformed into a livable habitat. It worked. Skylab hosted 3 crews, produced groundbreaking science, and proved that a rocket stage could become a home. Starship would be Skylab's spiritual successor, except instead of being built from a stage designed for something else, it would be purpose-adapted. And instead of being an experiment, it would be a blueprint. So how exactly would you turn a rocket into a space station? The answer is both more straightforward and more sophisticated than you might expect. Once Starship reaches its target orbit, the transformation begins. And crucially, it wouldn't depend on astronauts doing spacewalks with hand tools. It would be driven by robotics, autonomous systems operating on the exterior of the vehicle, carrying out the conversion according to pre-programmed plans. The Raptor engines, which served their purpose, getting Starship to orbit, would be removed, unnecessary mass jettisoned. And in their place, the infrastructure of a permanent orbital habitat would be installed. Large deployable solar arrays would unfold from the hull, generating the substantial electrical power that 20 crew members and their equipment would require. Radiators would extend to manage the enormous thermal loads that a fully crewed station generates. Docking ports would be attached at multiple points, allowing resupply vehicles and crew transport ships to come and go. And throughout the interior, the conversion would be equally thorough life support systems, air processors, water recycling loops, and communications infrastructure, all installed and integrated. The result would be organized vertically, across multiple distinct decks, each serving a specific purpose. At the very base of the station sits the utility core, the unglamorous but absolutely essential foundation of everything: power management systems, water recovery and recycling, carbon dioxide scrubbers, atmospheric processors that maintain breathable air at the right pressure, temperature, and composition. These are the systems that keep the station alive, and they would be tucked away at the bottom, accessible for maintenance but out of the daily living spaces of the crew. Moving upward, a dedicated storage and logistics deck would house supplies, spare components, food reserves, and the constant flow of materials that keeping 20 people alive in space demands. Above that, a health and fitness deck, because in microgravity, without gravity's constant resistance, human bodies begin to deteriorate within weeks. Muscles atrophy, bones lose density. The cardiovascular system weakens. Crew members on the ISS currently spend 2 hours every day exercising just to slow this process. A Starship station would have the volume for genuinely effective exercise equipment resistance systems, cardiovascular machines, rehabilitation tools not wedged into a corner somewhere, but occupying a dedicated space designed for the purpose. Then, crew quarters, individual rooms, private, enclosed, personal spaces with a door that closes. On the International Space Station, sleeping compartments are small, open cubicles barely large enough to float inside. The psychological toll of having no truly private space, for months at a time, among the same small group of people, is something astronauts speak about carefully. On a Starship station, each of the roughly 20 crew members would have their own space. Small, certainly, but genuinely private. A place to sleep, to think, to call home without being heard by everyone else on the station. Above the crew quarters, a full research laboratory complex, multiple labs for multiple disciplines: biology, materials, science, physics, medicine, astronomy. The constraint that has always limited research on the ISS has been space itself. Experiments compete for volume. Equipment has to be shared. Some research simply cannot be conducted because there is nowhere to put the apparatus. A Starship station eliminates that constraint. Research programs that don't exist yet because they physically couldn't fit on current platforms would suddenly become possible. Then a communal level, a dining area, a social space, a place where 20 people could actually gather together in the same room. This matters more than it might seem. Humans are social creatures. Isolation and the absence of normal social interaction is one of the most serious psychological risks of long-duration spaceflight. Having a genuine communal space, a place to share meals, to decompress together, to maintain the social fabric of a crew, that's not a luxury. That's mission-critical infrastructure. And at the very top of the station, something that might be the most powerful argument for this entire concept: the observation deck. Curved, panoramic windows. An unobstructed, 360-degree view of Earth rotating slowly beneath you and the infinite blackness of space beyond. No photograph captures it. No simulation replicates it. The overview effect, the profound, reported shift in perspective that astronauts experience when they first see Earth from space, is one of the most consistently described transformative experiences in human history. On a Starship station, that experience would be available every single day. But here's what makes all of this more than just an exciting concept. Here's why this matters beyond the engineering elegance of it. We are at a turning point in the human relationship with space. NASA is returning humans to the moon under the Artemis program. Mars missions are transitioning from theoretical to planned. Private companies are building entire industries around orbital operations. And all of it, every single part of that future, depends on answering questions we have not yet fully answered. How do humans actually live in space, long-term? Not survive, not endure, live. What does health look like over months and years in microgravity? What does psychology look like in confined, isolated environments? What do food systems, water systems, and medical systems look like at real operational scale? You cannot answer those questions on the ISS. It's too small, too constrained, too overloaded with the constant demands of its own maintenance to serve as a genuine test bed for the future. A Starship station could answer them. With 20 people, real living space, full research facilities, and the operational experience of running a large-scale habitat in orbit, it becomes the most important platform humanity has ever built for learning how to extend our presence beyond Earth. Every mission to the moon will be better because of what was learned there. Every Mars mission will be safer. Every future station will be smarter. There is a version of the future where living in space is still an exception, rare, brief, available only to a handful of specialists. And there is another version, one that's closer than it's ever been, where it becomes something larger, something more human. A Starship space station isn't just an engineering concept, it's the first chapter of that second version. And the rocket is already built. If your brain is buzzing right now, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you live on a Starship space station? And if so, which deck do you want? I'm personally taking the observation deck. I don't care if I have to sleep up there. And if you're new here, this channel is where space, science, and the biggest ideas in human history collide every week. Hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss what's coming. I'll see you in orbit.